In this video, we head to New Mexico, a place steeped in legends of lost gold, ancient relics, and hidden riches. For centuries, stories have swirled about the hidden treasures lying beneath New Mexico's deserts, mountains, and canyons. From tales of Spanish conquistador loot to elusive Native American artifacts, each legend has captivated adventurers and dreamers alike. In this video, we'll dive into some of New Mexico's most fascinating treasure mysteries, exploring the stories, clues, and history that make this state a treasure hunter's paradise. Enjoy. If you're into hunting for lost treasures and delving into the intriguing mysteries that surround them, then this story is right up your alley. It's realistic in every aspect, but it falls short of being a complete account, lacking a few crucial details. Nevertheless, it holds promise and might just yield a rewarding payoff. It seems like there's a good chance that this lost and blood-stained ox trainload of gold bullion is still hidden in its original location. If we assume that the boundaries of the site are reasonably well defined, even though it's in rugged terrain, then it's a pretty good bet. Over the last few years, I've been working on researching this early-day Arizona-mined lode of gold ingots. Despite the odds being against me, I've managed to put together a pretty comprehensive documentation effort. However, I've always believed that there's enough information out there for the persistent treasure hunter who's not afraid to keep looking. Recently, my interest in this topic led me to explore the Alameda Creek region of New Mexico, located several miles northwest of the vibrant western cattle town of Magdalena, a historic landmark steeped in successful mining and prospecting ventures. To the south is the site of the once bustling town of Kelly, now a ghost town with only a few remaining remnants, like an old church and a miner's cemetery. I was armed with a bundle of notes and a wealth of hearsay I'd gathered since first learning about the Ox Train massacre. I embarked on this journey as a final, desperate attempt to unravel the remaining enigmatic mysteries tied to the story. I arrived in Magdalena early one morning, just as the local stockmen were starting their day. I got to chatting over coffee. These were ranchers who ran their businesses across the sparsely settled region, but they lived in town for convenience, especially for schooling. I found out that 2 or 3 cattlemen were pretty adamant about claiming the isolated country of Alameda Creek as their territory. I was keen to visit them on their home turf. I figured the folks in the Alameda region would be the best people to ask about the gold-laden wagon train that met its tragic end in their area many years ago. But every time I mentioned going there, the locals in Magdalena said my vehicle wasn't suitable for the rough road conditions out there. I eventually had to take their advice and just take some pictures of the old ghost town of Kelly and the historic homes of the early cattle barons of Magdalena before I left. In Magdalena, I was told that exploring the Alameda Creek area would ideally require a 4-wheel drive vehicle or a pack train for a safer journey. Apart from the renowned Lost Adams diggings, there are lots of interesting legends surrounding the once heavily trafficked frontier road that runs through this area. One such tale is about the tragic demise of 3 Spanish priests who fell victim to a brutal Indian attack in the early days. All that remains to recount this grim event are a few cryptic markings etched by the dying missionaries onto nearby sheer stone cliffs. According to local ranchers, these telltale signs can still be seen in the vicinity today, not far from the rumored location of the hidden loot from the gold-laden wagon train. The legend of lost gold along Alameda Creek has been passed down through documented accounts and narratives from the region's early settlers. The creek was a vital part of the cross-country trail favored by early travelers, mainly because it had an intermittent water supply rather than because it was easy to cross. The area is also known for its rugged cliffs and caves, which were used as hideouts by Apache warriors. This made it a prime location for attacks on unsuspecting travelers. During the Civil War, a wagon train carrying gold set out from Fort Whipple, Arizona, bound for the Denver Mint. The ore train consisted of 2 ox-drawn wagons operated by Mexicans. It followed the well-trodden trail along Alameda Creek, nestled in the foothills northwest of present-day Magdalena. After departing the confines of the creek, the trail veered eastward, intersecting with the old Spanish Camino Real, King's Highway. A a major frontier thoroughfare stretching from El Paso del Norte to Albuquerque and onward to historic Santa Fe. Any train that went through the Alameda Creek region without enough protection and heavy armament could expect trouble from the Native American tribes. While the tribes that lived in the area to the north of Alameda in Pueblo settlements were more settled and peaceful, they didn't pose much of a threat to travelers. However, the Apaches, who were known for being relentless in their attacks, made the passage through Alameda dangerous. Given the small size of the ox train and the lack of guards, the gold-laden caravan was doomed from the moment it entered Alameda Creek. The harrowing Apache assault, which undoubtedly occurred at one of the region's most prominent landmarks, the old Bob McCord Ranch, is still operational in the cattle-raising business today. The most detailed account of the gold train attack comes from Agnes Morley Cleveland's book, No Life for a Lady, published in 1941 by Houghton Mifflin Company. Agnes was the daughter of William Raymond Morley, a renowned construction engineer who was responsible for routing the frontier railroad through New Mexico, including Raton Pass, south through Albuquerque and eventually into Mexico. Sadly, Morley died while working on the new railroad in the early 1880s. His widow remarried, and the family moved to the Magdalena region, settling in the Datil Mountains in February of 1886 to start a ranch. Agnes wrote about the grim fate of the gold-laden ox train during her time in this area. She describes the scene as follows: "There are always rumors of Indian attacks, and there's plenty of evidence that they've actually attacked. On my first visit to the Los Esteros Ranch, our secondary headquarters over the Datil Divide, I was taken several miles up the creek to see where the Indians killed the Mexicans, those who were with the bullion train. She says there's not much visible evidence, except for 2 small mounds of loose rock with wooden crosses on them. There are also some iron bits from the wagon scattered around. One thing that stood out was a 20-foot length of chain. It was made with irregular 6 to 10-inch hand-forged links and a large hook at one end. It was used to hitch the oxen to the wagon. There was still a hint of ash on the site, even though the massacre had happened several years ago. This is what greeted the senses. The mind's eye pictured the sudden onslaught of shouting savages emerging from the timber alongside the faint wagon tracks. They were probably marking a previous journey of the same caravan delivering provisions to the few settlers. I saw the men who were startled and defenseless, being driven off to their doom. They left behind the remnants of once human bodies and a blazing fire. Nobody saw this happen. We silently mounted our ponies and rode away." Agnes Morley Cleveland's visit to the massacre site is estimated to have occurred around 1888. The chain she mentions in her account was originally a hitching rail at the Bob McCord Ranch along Alameda Creek. It's since been relocated to the front of a mountain cabin resort on the Continental Divide, about 6 miles west of Datil. This artifact, a relic of the ill-fated wagon train, was pointed out to the writer in 1960 by the late Lorraine M. Reynolds, another daughter of Liam Raymond Morley and a sibling of the author of No Life for a Lady, shared during the interview that no one had ever found the gold that the Indians had removed and hidden before setting fire to the wagons. Despite lots of attempts, the treasure remained elusive. In a letter dated August 9, 1960, Mrs. Reynolds further explained, "The charred wagons, which left Fort Whipple, now Prescott, Arizona, on their way to the Denver Mint, were found. Human remains were found scattered on the wagons, but the gold bullion was never recovered." This backs up what we said earlier. But it seems that the gold still lies hidden in the hills or in the many caves along Alameda Creek. We can't soon forget the words of this remarkable frontier lady, excerpted from the same letter discussing the lost gold train. She wrote, "History is the narrative of human behavior. People shape history, and its diversity captivates us. During the era of the Gold Train Massacre, the area surrounding Magdalena was exceedingly remote. Indian raids persisted for years afterward, and Magdalena itself was far from peaceful. Jim McCord, an early cowhand in the area, told me during an interview that he arrived in Magdalena in 1909 and saw a violent fight that killed 9 people that night. He was looking for a place to stay and found refuge at the nearest livery stable. This fight happened in one of the village's main saloons. Bill Swingle, who was known as a chuckline rider among the ranchers in the area, spent his whole life looking for the lost bullion train along Alameda Creek. Somewhere in the 1890s, he found the chain, which was once part of the wagon equipment, Mrs. Reynolds said. But despite his efforts, the chuckline rider never managed to find the Apache treasure. If you want to get to this region, the best way is probably to take Highway 60, which goes west from Magdalena. About 14 miles after you leave that New Mexico town, you'll see a turnoff to the north on a dirt road. This leads to the ranching operations in the Alameda Creek area. Before you get to Alameda Creek, you'll see the headquarters of the Red Lake Ranch. The owner of this ranch lives in Magdalena and oversees cattle grazing across about 180 sections of land. Just keep going for about 3 more miles and you'll come across the site where the 3 Spanish priests met their tragic end. It's marked by 3 crosses commemorating their martyrdom. I was told that the Red Lake Ranch is about 40 miles north of Highway 60, while the Bob McCord Ranch, which is now owned by someone else, is about 3 miles further north. You can get to the area from the 40-mile point on a standard car, but beyond that, you'll need a 4-wheel vehicle. Before you go, it's a good idea to stop in Magdalena and chat with the local ranchers. They can tell you about the road conditions and give you the okay to explore on their ranch. Even if you don't find the treasure, you might learn something that will help with your research. Magdalena, New Mexico, a town weathered by time and nestled along the path of US HWY 60, stands as a testament to the fading echoes of the Old West. Founded in 1884, it once thrived as a bustling hub of cattle shipping in the untamed American Southwest. Legends whisper of a Spanish priest who named the nearby mountains after the revered Mary Magdalene, while others claim the town derived its name from the striking rock formations that bear a resemblance to her profile. Today, Magdalena remains a semi-ghost town, a living relic of the late 1800s, where the spirits of the past linger amidst the crumbling remains of abandoned home sites. With a population of around 500, it stands as a testament to a bygone era. Yet in the early 1880s, when Kelly boomed nearby, Magdalena was but a humble watering hole for cattlemen and a stagecoach stop along the Socorro route. But fortune smiled upon Magdalena when the Santa Fe Railroad extended its reach from Socorro in 1885. In the blink of an eye, saloons, dance halls, hotels, and restaurants sprang up, and sheep and cattle ranches dotted the surrounding countryside. The railroad, originally intended to serve the residents of Kelly, inadvertently breathed new life into Magdalena, transforming it into one of America's foremost cattle shipping centers. Nestled on the eastern edge of the vast San Augustine Plains, a sprawling grassland stretching over 100 miles, the town became a beacon of commerce and opportunity. Yet, as the mining town of Kelly met its demise in the 1930s, a part of Magdalena followed suit. The town straddling US 60 now wears its scars openly. Abandoned buildings crafted from adobe and wood stand as silent witnesses to a bygone era. Weathered by the relentless forces of wind, rain, and scorching summer sun, these structures teeter on the edge of decay. Surrounding fields and yards once bustling with life now offer a hidden trove for those seeking relics of the Old West, coins, jewelry, and cultural artifacts, waiting to be discovered amidst the remnants of forgotten dreams. Magdalena, a town of faded glory and enduring spirit, remains a testament to the wild and untamed spirit of the American frontier. As the winds sweep through its deserted streets, they carry with them the whispers of a bygone era, inviting the adventurous souls to step back in time and uncover the stories etched within its weathered walls. One fine spring morning, my friend and I embarked on a journey to the town of Magdalena. Leaving behind the comforts of Albuquerque, we set forth on a dusty trail, driving 75 miles south until we reached Socorro. From there, we turned west onto the well-maintained US 60, a black-topped road that would lead us to our destination. As we ventured deeper into the heart of the rugged landscape, the majestic snow-capped mountains captivated our senses. Magdalena awaited us, nestled to the north and south of US 60, which transformed into First Street within the town limits. A bustling hub, it boasted a collection of businesses that catered to the needs of travelers and locals alike. motels, service stations, restaurants, and more. The Magdalena School, a consolidated institution, offered education from grades 1 to 12. Yet it was the old Magdalena Inn that held the town's historical charm. Erected in the early 1900s during the height of prosperity, this magnificent brick structure stood just a block south of US 60. 2 stories tall, it once housed a saloon, a grand dining room, and a lounge where tales of the West were spun. The upstairs rooms and the sprawling porch on the western side were witness to countless stories of ranchers, miners, cowboys, politicians, and wandering souls. Today, a mere ghost of its former self, the inn has found a new caretaker in Thomas Daves, a man with dreams of restoring its former glory. Armed with our cameras and metal detectors, we explored the unpaved streets of Magdalena, seeking out abandoned buildings and other remnants of its past. Determined to uncover history's hidden gems, we combed through the fields and yards surrounding these structures. It was a patient quest, but one that yielded rewards. My companion, Norman Eaton, and I made multiple trips to Magdalena within the span of a month, refusing to give up until we struck gold. And gold we found in the form of forgotten treasures from the days of yore. Amidst the debris, we unearthed a Morgan silver dollar from 1896, a large cent bearing the date 1828, 2 Indian head cents from 1863 and 1870, a mysterious 30 piece with an unreadable date, a half dime dating back to 1857, a nickel from 1882, 2 seated Liberty dimes from 1873 and 1857, and a prized seated Liberty quarter from 1861. Magdalena, a town steeped in history and brimming with untold stories, had shared its secrets with us. Our journey had not only enriched our knowledge of the past, but also kindled a desire to preserve the legacy of this once thriving cattle shipping center. As we bid farewell to the fading echoes of the Old West, we carried with us a sense of gratitude for the opportunity to be part of its enduring tale. During the Great Depression years of the early 1930s, President Roosevelt created jobs for many people with the WPA program. It created work for America's large number of unemployed people and provided them with meals and a comfortable place to live. The government constructed barracks-type living quarters for them, and after the Depression was over, these buildings became abandoned and fell to ruin. To our surprise and enjoyment, we found a small group of abandoned WPA buildings in South Magdalena. The dirt yards around them were loaded with old coins dated between 1928 and 1945. We found 28 coins there in just a few hours' time. The majority of the coins were wheat cents, but we also found some Jefferson nickels and a few Mercury dimes. During our travels around the old town, we also found something that would be of interest to those of you that like old cars. In a dry wash on 10th Street just west of Main, we discovered the wreckages of many old cars from the 1940s and 50s. They are just sitting there along the banks of a dry stream, rusting away from climatic effects. Magdalena is one of many old towns in New Mexico that have proven to be a treasure hunter's dream come true. Most of the old buildings in and around the town are not posted against trespassing, but you should always obtain permission from the owners before rummaging around. If you plan to visit Magdalena sometime in the future, stop by and see the old ghost town of Kelly. It is just 2 miles south of town, and at one time it had a population of over 3,000 people. It is now totally abandoned. We also plan to check it out on one of our future trips into the area. If you are interested in Native American culture, the Alamo Indian Reservation is just a short distance from Magdalena on New Mexico State Road 169. Magdalena's newspaper is called the Mountain Mail and has been in existence since 1888. I'm sure that old copies of this publication would be of great interest to Western history buffs and treasure hunters. It is published monthly. Since some of the larger cities in New Mexico are located quite some distance from Magdalena, a good place to stay would be at the Woman on the Mountain Inn on US 60 in Magdalena. Good luck and good hunting.
On the eventful night of October 8, 1897, under the enchanting starry sky that adorned the semi-arid surroundings of Grants, New Mexico, a tale of daring unfolded. The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway Fast Express and Mail Train embarked on its westward journey. Little did the unsuspecting crew know that an uninvited guest lurked within their midst. With a cunning flourish, the masked intruder descended from the tender into the cab, brandishing a gun and commanding the attention of the engineer and fireman. His drawl carried an air of authority as he warned against increasing the train's speed. "Do not increase the speed," he hissed. "When we reach a certain point, I will give you an order to stop." The engineer, who had been in this situation before, obeyed without hesitation. As they approached the designated spot, two more figures emerged from the shadows and climbed aboard the train. One of them leaned out of the right-hand side opening, keeping a vigilant watch. A mere moment passed before he instructed the engineer to proceed, but only at his command. The bandit gang's intentions became clear as two express cars were swiftly detached from the engine, indicating that more members were involved in this audacious heist. The surrounding landscape was bathed in the light of the stars, the trees and hills casting long shadows across the land. A sudden explosion shattered the stillness, followed by another. After a few moments, a masked rider approached the train, leading a saddled horse. The bandit inside the train chuckled before saying, "You may have your train back, Mr. Engineer." With that, he mounted the horse and rode off into the night, leaving the Hogwarts Express to continue on its journey. Jumping down to the ground, engineer and fireman ran back to the second express car. The bandits had known which one to break into, which meant they possessed inside information from some source. The express company messenger was found bound securely and gagged, lying safely off the roadbed in a shallow barrow pit. He had been forced to open the side door under threat of having the car being blown up with him inside. Whoever blew the two through safes to be opened in Los Angeles knew exactly how to do it. The doors hung awry by one hinge, but there was no other damage. Both had been looted of sacks filled with gold and silver coin. Backing up, the engineer reconnected the train and shunted back into Grants. The alarm from there brought posses of officers and express company agents to the scene. The trail of 5 riders was followed into the vast lava beds south of Grants and irrevocably lost. The money taken was first reported to be $50,000, then the amount was changed to $100,000. A year later, it became definitely known that the bandits escaped with $160,000 in newly minted coins. Absolutely no clues could be found to identify perpetrators of the successful crime. It was charged to the Blackjack Ketchum Gang, or the Blackjack Christian Outlaws, or maybe it had been the work of some lesser-known gang. The sad truth was that no lawmen or express company agents could tie it to any gang. All theories were not even near guesses. No one imagined at the time that it could be the skillful work of the Wild Bunch led by Butch Cassidy, George Leroy Parker. They were then supposedly barely ahead of pursuing lawmen far to the north. The audacious heist was undoubtedly the handiwork of the notorious Wild Bunch, orchestrated in the signature style of none other than Cassidy himself. Butch Cassidy, the mastermind, had enlisted the aid of Deaf Charlie Hanks, Elza Lay, Harry Longabaugh, known as the Sundance Kid, and Ben Kilpatrick, alias the Tall Texan. Their criminal exploits became the stuff of legend, inspiring countless tales of buried treasure. Whispers circulated that the ill-gotten gains were concealed within the treacherous lava beds, lightening the outlaws' burden as they evaded pursuing posses. Some claimed the loot was stashed away in the Mogollon Mountains, while others insisted it lay hidden in the White Mountains of Arizona. Yet these accounts, penned by various authors, failed to identify the true culprits. In truth, the stolen riches lay concealed further south, carefully secreted in 2 caches near marker trees, along the San Francisco River, upstream from the WS Ranch near Alma, New Mexico. The 5 outlaws traversed the rugged terrain, unhurried, their horses burdened with the weight of the original money sacks. Each member of the gang possessed an abundance of additional spoils from their Wyoming and Montana escapades, leaving no room for more. Their journey led them from the river camp to Mogollon, where Cassidy bid his comrades farewell. He set off for Alma, intent on meeting his dear friend Captain William French, the esteemed manager of the English syndicate-owned WS outfit. French had known Cassidy for nearly 2 years under the alias of John Lowe. When French confided in Cassidy about the ranch's constant theft problem, Cassidy assured him that he would put an end to it. French was relieved and promised to pay the cowboys double top-hand wages if they succeeded. It was a perfect opportunity for the outlaws to hide out while they worked on the ranch. Cassidy left and returned with Lay and Deaf Charlie Hanks, and later the Sundance Kid and Tall Texan, all using aliases. They cleared the ranch of rustlers, and French boasted of their expertise. However, unbeknownst to French, the outlaws had rustled many cows themselves. They knew all the tricks and could guess what the rustlers would do next. In 1898, Deaf Charlie left, and a week later, Sundance Kid and Tall Texan went their separate ways. Cassidy quit to open a saloon in Alma, where he was well-liked and successful. But when a Pinkerton detective arrived in town, Cassidy had to leave between suns after saving the detective's life. Only Lay remained behind to work for the ranch. For reasons unbeknownst to him, he veered away from Cassidy's meticulously planned escapades of train heists and bank robberies up north. The Wild Bunch, while loosely connected to Blackjack Ketchum's New Mexico gang, enticed Lay into participating in a grand operation. According to French's account, Mac, also known as William K. McGinnis, expressed his desire to accompany a shipment of cattle to Colfax County in northeastern New Mexico. As Lay departed, French arrived in Springer only to discover that a group of bandits had seized a Colorado and Southern Railroad passenger train. To his astonishment, one of the outlaws was none other than his cherished cowpuncher, Mac. Lay joined forces with Blackjack Ketchum and his brother Sam, while Deaf Charlie Hanks and Kid Curry descended from the Northern Territories to offer their assistance. On the night of July 11, 1899, near Folsom, the train was forcibly halted. However, despite their efforts to blow open the express car safe, the gang returned empty-handed. In their hasty retreat, they sought refuge in the treacherous Turkey Canyon, only to be pursued and cornered by a swift posse comprised of lawmen and agents from Trinidad, Colorado. A fierce gunfight ensued, resulting in the deaths of Deputy U.S. Marshal W.H. Love and 2 Trinidad officers. Lay and Sam Ketchum suffered grave injuries. Sam, unable to escape, was apprehended and ultimately succumbed to blood poisoning from a shattered arm. The remaining members managed to elude capture, with Lay receiving aid from loyal acquaintances as he journeyed southward, eventually finding solace in Carlsbad. During his recovery from his wounds, fate betrayed Lay as he was recognized and apprehended on August 15th. He faced charges of second-degree murder for the killing of Love. The presiding judge sentenced him to a lifetime behind bars under the name of William McGinnis. Down around Alma, the quiet, handsome young outlaw had made many friends. None of them wanted to believe he was actually a notorious train robber. Prominent among his friends were French and 2 brothers who owned a general store, Louis and Walter Jones. These friends appealed to Territorial Governor M.A. Otero to pardon him. Finally, it was granted to take effect January 10, 1906. Knowing that a new administration in Washington intended to replace him, Otero had Lay released 3 weeks before that date. Lay went immediately to Alma. His time was divided between the Jones brothers and French. He worked for the W.S. and the merchants for about 18 months. During this period, he was checked on occasionally by officers who expected him to return to outlawry. Instead, he behaved himself. One day he said to the brothers, "I'm going to be gone for maybe 3 weeks. I know where there is some money buried at the roots of 2 juniper trees down near the Mexican border." Beyond that, he explained nothing, departing with a pack horse carrying grub and a bedroll. Although he did head southward, Lay circled back and around the W.S. unseen to the San Francisco. At the end of 4 weeks, the brothers began to worry, fearing that he had gotten into serious trouble. Then Lay rode in with $58,000, of which $100 was in silver dollars. Still in the original money sacks, it was piled under a slicker in the storeroom of a small bar, run in connection with the general store. Lay did nothing now, hanging around in a very studious mood. He appeared to be thinking deeply about something. At that time, silver dollars were scarce. When the brothers needed some in the store for change, they gave him currency for the silver until all of it had changed hands. One day he packed up again, leaving the small fortune behind, and remained away 2 weeks. Returning empty-handed, he shrugged his shoulders philosophically. "The biggest money eludes me," he told the brothers. "There's still $108,000 or $10,000 buried in the ground. I just can't find it." Finally, he departed for Baggs, Wyoming. He married there and settled down to punching cattle for his father-in-law. For a few years, he kept in touch with the brothers with an occasional letter. In one, he reported that he had bought a ranch, which was in no wise true. Many years later, when no harm could come to Lay over the buried loot, the brothers talked to H.A. Hoover, a former citizen of Mogollon and Alma. He had known the outlaw. They said to him, "He seemed to trust us without question, talking freely and leaving all that money in a corner of the storeroom." However, Lay did not tell them he was part of the gang that buried the money, nor did he name anyone who did. In fact, he never bothered to explain why he lied about intending to go south towards Mexico. Probably he had no idea they know different. They learned he was on the San Francisco because two prospectors, seeing a lone man in camp, distributed him and his horses to the brothers. It could have been no one but their friend Lay, whom they still called Mac. When he embarked on his quest for the second hidden treasure, the same prospectors observed him stealthily navigating the terrain, occasionally engaging in the act of excavation. Unbeknownst to Lay, they were busy tunneling into the side of a mountain slope, concealing their mining activities and encampment with sturdy timber. On cloudless days, they could spy on his every move from their vantage point. The brothers were informed of this intriguing information after Lay's final departure. Another enigma that Lay kept concealed was the source of the ill-gotten gains. However, the brothers firmly believed that it originated from the infamous Grant's train robbery. None other could account for such a substantial sum. Various pieces of circumstantial evidence further bolstered this theory. Following Lay's arrest, they discovered that the adept cowboys in French's employ were none other than the notorious Wild Bunch. Shortly after the Grant's robbery, this quintet had mysteriously appeared in the vicinity. Upon establishing his Alma saloon and cultivating numerous friendships, Cassidy, with his amiable demeanor, once cryptically remarked, "Should this enterprise ever falter, fear not, for I am privy to a close-by treasure trove, capable of funding an even grander establishment." Delving into accounts of the Wild Bunch, the brothers deduced that, apart from Lay, none of the gang had managed to journey this far south incognito to retrieve the concealed riches. They hypothesized that Lay's failure to locate the second, larger cache stemmed from his involvement in burying the smaller one. Although he possessed a rough idea of its whereabouts, he still required many days to pinpoint its exact location. Cassidy himself likely concealed the larger fortune, possibly with the help of only one other person. Thus, only two individuals knew the precise location, hidden at the base of a tree. Before one of the brothers passed away, and the company became Jones and McKean Mercantile, they confessed to searching for the stash. However, their search was limited to where Lay was seen hunting on the south side of San Francisco. Their absences were mistaken for prospecting trips. French's book, Some Recollections of a Western Ranchman, exposed the secret. The last two chapters detailed the Wild Bunch's stay at the W.S. Ranch, attracting treasure hunters. Nevertheless, the brothers remained silent. After H.A. Hoover's Early Days in the Mogollons was published, extensive search efforts followed. Hoover's book quoted the brothers' confidential statements about Lay and the buried treasure. E.g., Doc Williams, who had connections in Alma and Glenwood, heard all the brothers knew about Lay. In 1972, friends in Alma informed Williams that the cache had not been discovered. While some dispute whether the loot originated from the Grant train robbery, its origin is of little importance. What matters is that it remains somewhere on the San Francisco Trail. Inquiring about the treasure in Alma and Glenwood is met with hostility and evasive responses. The few individuals who possess the knowledge discourage treasure hunters, as they believe they will eventually find it themselves.
In the late 1800s and well into the next century, the southwestern region of New Mexico buzzed with the frenetic energy of mining. It was a time when brave souls, both solitary and in groups, braved unimaginable dangers and persevered through untold hardships. The Spanish and Mexican miners toiled in obscurity, their stories lost to time long before the arrival of Anglo miners in the 1870s and 1880s. Yet, the tale of their invaluable contribution remains untold, waiting for a worthy chronicler to bring it to life. While some records exist of the later Anglo mining endeavors, they paint an incomplete picture. Ghostly remnants of these operations still haunt the landscape, slowly succumbing to the ravages of time. The earlier Mexican workings, on the other hand, lie concealed and elusive, but they are there, hidden in the depths of the earth. This is the saga of New Mexican mining, a captivating narrative of human ambition and aspiration, forged amidst the harshest and most unforgiving terrains known to man. Among those intrepid pioneers, many eked out a modest living from their labor. A fortunate few struck it rich, but the majority had to be content with meager sustenance or seek fortunes elsewhere. Enduring scorching heat and bone-chilling cold, they faced the constant threat of Indian attacks, battled scarcity of food, grappled with the omnipresent dirt and disease, and toiled in treacherous conditions underground. These unsung heroes of the mining world, though their existence may have been humble and unadorned, reveled in a time and freedom that has long since faded into oblivion. In the realm of recent times, an impenetrable wall of bureaucracy has sealed the mining realm, obstructing the path to the cherished days of free mineral exploration. The winds of hope that once blew through those early years have been stifled, and the desire to be a humble miner in southwest New Mexico, or any corner of this vast land, has been subdued. The Indians, often unjustly portrayed in history, were less formidable in their defense of their lands and freedoms compared to today's bureaucratic forces. If the Apaches had enlisted the aid of the esteemed officials of present-day Washington, no army from that era could have dislodged them from the untamed Southwest. Fortunately, southwest New Mexico was untouched by the clutches of bureaucracy, allowing a mining history to unfold. The restrictive and rigid policies of the formidable government primarily reigned east of the Mississippi and had not yet expanded to the extent they have in our time. Many of us would gladly trade the comforts of our era for the risks, challenges, limited transportation, and harsher conditions of those early days, all in exchange for the unparalleled freedom they offered. You may have heard whispers of the Mexican and Anglo endeavors at places like Pinos Altos and Santa Rita, yet little has been penned about those valiant Mexican miners who toiled in Gold Gulch, the Burro Mountains, the Zacatons, and throughout the formidable Tres Hermanas range. They were a formidable force, persevering under primitive and perilous circumstances, and they yielded a wealth that went largely unnoticed. It was a wealth of potential, a promise of fortune. This is precisely why those early miners endured the harshest and most treacherous conditions. In those times, toiling on a farm would only yield a meager 50 cents for a grueling day's labor. By venturing into the realm of mining, one could earn $1 or more per day, even while working for others. In one's own mining operation, an average of $1.45 per day was within reach. Years of such labor served as the bedrock for many a family fortune, even if the amount may seem meager by today's standards, barely reaching the poverty level. In the desert Southwest, there were forgotten Mexican miners who worked tirelessly in Gold Gulch, the Burro Mountains, the Zacatons, and throughout the Tres Hermanas range. They braved harsh and dangerous conditions, but were able to produce a significant amount of wealth. Farm work may have only paid 50 cents a day, but mining could earn them $1 or more per day. Many of these miners were able to build family fortunes through years of hard work, even if the amount may seem meager by today's standards. The early miners cherished the time and freedom they had in the desert Southwest, a time that no longer exists. The old Mahoney tunnels at the very top of the Floridas were cut by hand labor, supplied by burros, and yet produced vast wealth. The ore was hauled out by burro-packed trains, and all supplies were hauled in the same way, up steep, narrow pathways. The rich copper, lead, zinc, and silver complex ore was hand-sorted, sacked, and transported into Mexico. Can we really even imagine what over $1 million pre-$1,915 was worth? It is doubtful that today's debased, overtaxed dollar bill is worth much more than 1 cent of that 1915 dollar. The miners' camps still remain, a testament to their hard work and dedication. They mined by day and sorted ore by night, sitting by their flimsy brush and canvas huts, hand-cobbing only the best portions of the ore by firelight. It was a tough job, but for these miners, it was a symbol of their freedom and pride. In the depths of these rocky walls lies hidden treasure, discarded by the untrained eye, for no glimmer of the precious pay streak reveals itself. But fear not, for the skilled Mexican miners possess a keen detector that uncovers the hidden gems missed even by the most cautious among them. To the west, beyond the reaches of these majestic walls, lie the Little Hatchet Mountains. Within these mountains, the Sylvanite placer district once thrived, accompanied by the presence of numerous old lode mines centered around the ancient town of Old Hachita. Even with their rudimentary dry placering techniques, the Sylvanite boom yielded a significant amount of gold, while the lode mines in the vicinity produced an array of complex ores, rich in copper, lead, zinc, and silver. Venturing further west and north towards the land of Lordsburg, one encounters a vibrant hub of mining activity. The Pyramid District boasts exceptional silver mines, while the regions of Burros and Little Burros teem with various mining operations. Carlisle, a town situated to the north of Lordsburg, remains a steadfast producer, its mining endeavors still persevering. Once this land was dotted with countless mines, and thousands of men toiled tirelessly, earning their livelihood from the depths of the earth. Yet alas, today, the mining industry in these parts has all but vanished. However, amidst the barren landscape, certain scars remain as a testament to the grandeur of the mining past. The colossal copper pits of Tyrone and Santa Rita stand as the prominent reminders, still being worked and yielding the precious metal. The efforts of today far surpass those of yesteryears as the quest for copper continues unabated. Yet hope remains in the hills that encircle Mogollon, Pinos Altos, and Carlisle. Within their depths lie veins of good ore, awaiting discovery by the bold and adventurous. A touch of the past lingers near the surface of Georgetown, where native silver can still be found, reminiscent of the silver nuggets that once fooled a Chinese gentleman, mistaking them for mere iron. This serendipitous encounter sparked the legendary Georgetown silver boom. The Black Range, shrouded in mystery, conceals an abundance of silver ore waiting to be unearthed by intrepid souls. And who knows, hidden within its embrace, there may lie more wondrous treasures, akin to the fabled bridal chamber near Lake Valley. This magnificent vug alone bestowed upon the world over $3 million worth of silver, valued at less than a single ounce. Indeed, the Mexican miners, with their unwavering spirit and unwearied hands, have delved into the depths of the earth, unearthing riches beyond imagination. Their labor, though often fraught with hardship, has brought forth a sense of freedom and pride, for they have harnessed the power of nature's bounty, transforming mere rocks into gleaming treasures. Let us honor their perseverance and recognize the value of their noble work. Why, one might ask, would people still seek silver in this day and age? Especially when a dollar is worth so much less than it was in the past. The regulations, taxes, and frustrations imposed on potential miners only add to the discouragement. In the Hillsborough area, there is still good gold ore to be found. However, despite the fact that gold is now more than 40 times more valuable than silver, the suffocating bureaucracy makes it less feasible to exploit the most promising properties. Many valuable properties now sit idle without any worth in today's world, and it is certain that they will remain untouched for years to come. From Deming, one can gaze up at Cook's Peak, where several productive mines once thrived. Unfortunately, these sites have been abandoned for years, and gaining access to them has become a challenge. A handful of ranchers have even blocked the limited access roads, denying entry to tens of thousands of acres of public lands, including those managed by the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, and forest lands. Their actions are unjustifiable, as the BLM acknowledges that the gates are not supposed to be locked and claims to be investigating the matter. However, this investigation has dragged on for far too long. One can only assume that these public lands are being protected from the very public they should serve. But why would anyone want to visit these desolate mining sites? They were once home to only miners, toiling away in perilous and unsanitary conditions. They had to contend with the constant threat of Indians, rattlesnakes, scorpions, and various other hazards. In winter, they nearly froze, while in summer, they roasted under the scorching sun. They earned a meager wage of just a few dollars a day, and sometimes not even that. Oh, how we should be grateful for our present circumstances. The mining frontier has become mired in a bureaucratic quagmire, buried beneath an avalanche of paperwork and legalistic harassment. The Indians, miners, and all those who once populated these lands have mostly vanished. Is it not natural, then, to look back at these old sites with a bittersweet nostalgia and yearn for the opportunity to engage in the arduous labor that those early pioneers were free to undertake?
As Malpai Slim Hawks traveled down the Rio Bonito, he kept a vigilant eye on the distant mountaintops and nearby hills for Apache smoke signals. It was August 1877, and the feared Warm Springs Apaches, led by Chief Victorio, were on a raiding spree. If their scouts spotted him, they would signal the main band, and Slim would have to outrun them to Fort Stanton, far to the east. Slim saw dust trails from the peaks of the White Mountains, where clear streams flowed into the Rio Bonito in central New Mexico. As his mule rounded a bend, he noticed a cavern on the creek's right bank. The low cave, eroded by a spring runoff, exposed a hole filled with small black stones. Intrigued, Slim pulled one out and realized it was a silver brick covered in verdigris. Excited, Slim loaded his mule with as many silver bars as it could carry. He quickly hid the remaining treasure by collapsing the bank with a shovel before continuing down the Rio Bonito. The discovery made him forget about the lurking Apaches until he noticed a column of black smoke to the north. Suddenly, bullets whizzed past him from the timber across the creek. Slim grabbed his carbine, spurred his horse, and fled, with his heavily loaded mule slowing him down. 5 mounted Apaches emerged from the timber, and Slim managed to shoot 2 before the rest retreated. He raced on, exhausted, as bullets flew around him. Nearly 5 miles later, the Apaches renewed their attack, but the rough terrain forced them into a detour, tiring their ponies. Slim found a break in the canyon wall and drove the pack mule into the opening, eluding the Apaches, who howled in frustration. Near sundown, Slim hoped to evade them completely. He headed south toward the Rio Ruidoso, reaching the timber along the river before dusk. Using the trees for cover, he circled northeast off the stream as darkness fell, hoping the Apaches would assume he continued south and pursue him in the wrong direction. Slim slowed to a steady pace and reached Fort Stanton around midnight. The soldiers, most of whom were out chasing Apaches from Chief Victorio's bands, were displeased to see him, viewing him as a foolish prospector in dangerous territory. Slim camped near the fort for safety, and after a few days of rest, continued east to Roswell, leaving his stock at Aaron O. Wilburn's wagon yard. He then took a stagecoach north to Albuquerque with the silver ingots. In Albuquerque, Slim sold the ingots for $2,800. Though the bars were mixed with copper and lead, they still attracted considerable interest. Each ingot weighed a little over 4 pounds, cast in sand molds with smooth top surfaces. Despite having no marks indicating their origin, it was clear they were over a century old, likely mined and cast by Spaniards. Many tried to coax Slim into revealing the treasure's location, thinking he had found the legendary cache of gold and silver from Gran Quivira, but Slim had no idea himself. Eager to find golden ingots, Slim planned to return to the Rio Bonito. In Albuquerque, he searched old Spanish records and journals at the San Felipe de Neri church, but found no evidence related to his discovery. 2 experienced miners suggested the treasure was buried during the 1680 Pueblo Indian Rebellion, based on the verdigris on the ingots. Slim, however, remained tight-lipped about the location. Known only by his nickname, Malpai Slim was a lone wolf, which often led him into trouble in turbulent New Mexico. By October, he was ready to head south again. At Roswell, where Captain Joseph C. Lee had taken over Wilburn's business, Slim acquired extra pack mules and supplies for a swift return to the Rio Bonito, hoping to haul out a great fortune. Upon reaching Fort Stanton, Slim was delayed by the military due to ongoing Apache attacks in southern and western New Mexico territory. Lieutenant Colonel Nathan A.M. Dudley, commander of the 9th Cavalry, denied him permission to proceed. Dudley, who seemed to disdain Slim and all prospectors, believed they sought to get rich from minerals they had no right to claim. Despite this setback, Slim had other plans for returning to the Rio Bonito. Suspecting Slim's intentions, Colonel Dudley sent out night patrols. The next morning, Slim set off for Roswell but circled south and then north, aiming to return to the Rio Bonito 5 miles west of the fort. However, a patrol captured him. Colonel Dudley imprisoned Slim in the guardhouse, threatening to keep him there. Slim secured his release in late November by agreeing to leave for Roswell. After some time, he followed the Rio Hondo and then the Ruidoso, evading patrols. A fierce snowstorm trapped him in the mountains, forcing him to take shelter in a cave for a week. With 4 feet of snow, finding the cache was impossible, so he headed east to escape the winter. While in Roswell, he heard exaggerated accounts of the Lincoln County War. As the new year began, the fighting was reaching a climax. Determined to retrieve his treasure, Slim set out across the desert and reached Angus. There, armed riders surrounded his camp. They suspected him of being an enemy or a smuggler and detained him. Slim insisted he was just a prospector heading for White Oaks. After searching his packs and finding no arms or ammunition, the riders grudgingly accepted his story, but refused to let him continue west or north. They escorted him east and sent him towards Roswell with a stern warning. Malpai Slim took their threat seriously. Back in Roswell, he wrote to his 2 prospector friends in Albuquerque, asking for their help to retrieve his treasure. However, he never heard back from them. Meanwhile, the Lincoln County War reached its bloody climax. On April 1st, Sheriff William Brady and his deputy, George Hindman, were killed. In July, a 3-day battle ensued, with Billy the Kid and his gang holed up in the McSween residence. Colonel Dudley brought in his troops, allowing the Murphy-Dolan faction and a sheriff's posse to kill many men, including McSween, and burn down the house. Though the war was supposedly over, tensions remained high. Believing it safe, Malpai Slim set out once more to retrieve the silver. Traveling via the southern route, he reached a familiar spot on the Rio Bonito without incident. Making camp, he began searching for the exact site where the ingots were cached. After 3 days without success, he surveyed the stream's sides, seeking another possible site. Nothing turned up, but he remained confident he was in the right place. A recent flood had likely washed away his markers. He knew the ingots were not deeply buried and expected to find them with a bit more digging. Every morning, Slim scouted his hidden camp for danger, expecting Apaches, not white men. One morning while eating breakfast, he was surprised when 5 rough-looking men silently rode into his camp, their approach muffled by the thick grass. Slim eyed them warily as they dismounted and advanced, their gun belts creaking. "Digging here, eh?" drawled the red-headed leader. "Maybe. You never know, there might be valuables in the gravel down on bedrock," Slim replied. "Maybe. Throw some chuck together, we're a mite hungry." Slim cooked venison, sourdough biscuits, and coffee for the men, likely outlaws. They ate in silence. Slim expected to be robbed, but was surprised when they took only a little food before riding off without a word. 3 nights later, while Slim was sitting by his campfire, a bullet whizzed past his head. He instantly rolled flat and grabbed his Winchester carbine. Crawling to a pile of loose boulders for cover, he waited as more shots rang out. After a brief pause, the firing resumed, but no bullets came close. Realizing the attackers had killed his stock, Slim suspected it was white outlaws trying to strand him, not Apaches. He waited, hoping to spot one of them. Finally, a voice called from the brush, "Hey, you give up?" Slim stayed silent. "You in there, you want to live, you give up." The voice sounded odd, making it unclear if it was an Indian or a renegade white man. Preparing to defend himself, Slim remained quiet. After more calls for his surrender, the speaker fell silent. Slim heard scurrying sounds and faint, unintelligible voices, then quiet again. An Apache appeared, cautiously advancing into the moonlight, he holding a rifle ready to fire. As he moved closer, 2 more Apaches joined him. They stood near the fire, peering into the shadows, thinking Slim had fled. The first Apache summoned others from the brush. When the 3rd Apache moved forward, Slim fired, killing him instantly. He continued shooting, taking down the other 2 before they could react. Knowing his position was exposed, Slim crawled backward from the rocks, moving under low tree limbs for cover. Silence reigned for half an hour, as he guessed the Apaches were closing in. Finally, he heard a faint sound. An Apache, lying 10 feet away, inched forward, pausing to listen intently. The crash of Malpai Slim's rifle echoed through the canyon. The Apache slumped to the ground, dying without a struggle. Slim quickly moved to a new hiding place, growing increasingly impatient as the night wore on without a renewed attack. It dawned on him that the Apaches might be few in number, giving him a chance to escape. Crawling out of the brush, he hunched over and withdrew to the north. He followed the Rio Bonito downstream into a canyon. As daylight turned from silver gray to yellow, he realized he needed to find cover. Just then, a bullet whizzed overhead, forcing him to drop to the ground. He scrambled to take refuge among scattered rocks. To his horror, he saw 5 Apaches charging his position. He fired hurriedly, causing 2 to drop out of sight in the tall grass. Seeking a better defensive spot, he exposed himself momentarily, only to be struck in the left shoulder by a rifle shot. Fighting back the blinding pain, he managed to fire a few more rounds. Suddenly, from down the canyon, he heard yells and saw a dozen mounted Apaches coming at a gallop. Slim lay low as the grounded Apaches fired wildly. The mounted ones began shooting as they approached, planning to overwhelm him. As Slim braced for what seemed to be the end, the sound of many hooves echoed through the canyon. A cavalry patrol charged in behind the mounted Apaches and opened fire. The Indians broke and fled, trying to escape past Slim's position. The cavalry pursued them, forcing the Apaches to vanish into the wilderness. The cavalrymen, part of Troop F with the 9th Cavalry under Captain Henry Carroll, had been returning to Fort Stanton after a fight with Apaches at Dog Canyon on August 5, 1878. Hearing the gunfire, they had diverted into the canyon. They took Malpai Slim to Fort Stanton, where a surgeon treated his severe wound. It would be a while before he could use his left arm again. Bitter over the events, Slim traveled with a cavalry-escorted wagon train to Roswell, staying at Lee's place to recover. Restless, he spent time at the general store's whiskey counter and in the adobe cantinas at night, breaking his usual silence to talk to Lee about the silver on the Rio Bonito. Lee encouraged him to return when he was physically able. Details of Slim's account leaked out, prompting others to search the area despite the snow-covered ground. In May, Slim returned to Roswell, outfitting himself again. Meanwhile, Lee discovered that the site Slim described was near an ancient Spanish trail. Lee theorized that the silver ingots had been in transit to Mexico and were buried during an emergency, such as an Indian attack. No silver mines existed near there according to Spanish records. In June, Slim set out with 3 of Lee's trusted Mexicans and some stock, including burros. They tunneled into a 300-foot stretch of the bank but found nothing. Moving higher along the Rio Bonito, they dug test holes but found no clues. Disgusted, Slim returned to Albuquerque and later prospected east of the Sangre de Cristos. Southern New Mexico saw a rush of prospectors, leading to the discovery and development of mines. By 1884, the hills were safe from Indians, and the mining industry established towns and railroads. One roving prospector, Dick Bacon, usually headquartered in White Oaks. In March 1882, while prospecting on the upper Rio Bonito, he spotted a small piece of black iron in the clear water, which turned out to be a silver ingot. For 2 weeks, he searched the stream but found no more ingots. Returning to White Oaks, Bacon made cautious inquiries and learned that Slim had found and sold silver from the Rio Bonito years earlier. Despite guarding his secret, news of his find leaked out. The Albuquerque Review reported a 4-pound silver bar, sparking a rush to the Rio Bonito. Men searched the stream from the headwaters to Fort Stanton, but if anyone found more silver, they kept it secret. In 1886, Malpai Slim heard of Bacon's find and was startled, as he had almost doubted his own discovery. Unable to return to his hidden cache, Slim wandered south, visiting mining camps and listening for more news about Bacon's silver ingot. The story had by then become entangled with legends of a great Spanish treasure and was elevated to mythical proportions. When Malpai Slim returned to the Rio Bonito for a final search, he found nothing and eventually wandered west to prospect in Arizona. He died in Prescott around 1900. During his last years, he was interviewed several times by a reporter from the Prescott Courier, who spun a dramatic tale of the silver bars. This account was picked up and republished by other territorial newspapers, fueling the search for silver on the Rio Bonito, especially during the 1880s. One notable treasure hunter was Miguel A. Otero, who later became governor of New Mexico. From his youth to the end of his life, Otero was involved in mining and had a keen interest in lost Spanish mines and treasures. He made several expeditions into Lincoln County, working on old Spanish mines and treasure hunts. Despite his efforts, he never came close to finding the silver cache. Otero, who believed Slim to be dead, eventually learned everything Slim knew about the silver, both in Roswell and Albuquerque. In his memoirs, Otero hinted at having obtained actual records of the cache from documents in Santa Fe and Old Mexico. If he did, he only shared this information with his closest associates. While inspecting the John S. Chisholm Ranch for sale, a Mexican named Jesus Sosa assured Otero that he could lead him directly to the Rio Bonito silver. Otero set out with Sosa, traveling in a buckboard, which allowed them to navigate the flatlands along the Rio Bonito. From their camp, they searched the stream on foot, but Sosa could never find the right place. Otero eventually returned to Albuquerque, convinced that the silver had been planted by Spaniards and was still there. Throughout his life, Otero investigated numerous stories of lost mines and buried treasures, some as nebulous as Sosa's tale. He even tried to promote a bed of ichthyol near Gallup, believing it to be petroleum. Despite the many searches, the chances are high that not all the silver ingots discovered by Malpai Slim have been found. Present-day treasure hunters believe that most of the silver is still hidden. The search continues frantically, with many hunters entering Lincoln County Billy the Kid country via U.S. Highway 70. Although it is well established that Slim and Bacon found their silver on the Rio Bonito, treasure hunters also explore the Nogal, Hondo, Ruidoso, and Eagle Creek areas. In November of 1958, I, Captain Leonard V. Feege, along with Ken Prather, Mill Millage Wessel, and Tom Bartlett, or possibly Berklet, went hunting on the White Sands Missile Range. We had separated during the hunt, and I ventured down a canyon alone. I came across a small hill with some open caves. One cave, tucked away and fairly hidden, caught my attention. I had planned to meet the others at the base of the hill, but since they hadn't arrived yet, I decided to explore the cave. The cave was spacious enough to stand in until I reached a small opening, about 30 inches across. I shined my flashlight through the hole and saw what appeared to be a larger shaft on the other side. Crawling through the narrow passage on my stomach, I found myself in a more expansive part of the cavern. The air was heavy with dust and difficult to breathe, so I sat down to rest on what I thought was a pile of rocks. As I coughed and tried to recover, the dust covering the pile shifted, and to my shock, I realized these weren't rocks but smelted gold bars, each about the size of a house brick. Excited by the discovery, I wanted to explore further. But as I moved, I stirred up more dust, making it even harder to see and breathe. With my flashlight, I spotted 3 neatly stacked piles of gold, and another partially buried under what seemed to be a collapsed section of the cave wall. When I began to feel sick again from the dust, I decided to leave the cavern. I met up with the others and told them what I had found. Tom Bartlett and I considered taking some of the gold with us, but we were unsure of the legalities surrounding such a discovery on federal land, so we decided against it. Later, I led the group back to the cave. However, Ken and Mill were too large to fit through the narrow passage, so only Tom and I went inside. As we crawled through the dusty tunnel, we stirred up even more debris, making the air thick and suffocating. We reached the 4 piles of gold and confirmed our earlier findings. We discussed what to do next. Concerned that someone else might find the cave, we decided the safest option was to conceal the entrance. Tom and I spent several hours gathering rocks and dirt, working in shifts to get air outside the small tunnel. We caved in the walls and entrance to make it appear as though the tunnel ended in a dead end. Since that day, we've made several attempts to gain permission to return to the cave, but each time the commander of the range denied us access. I believe we could work safely inside the cavern if we had gas masks or air filtration devices. If any more of the shaft has collapsed beyond what we blocked off, it would take some time to clear the passage. From what we saw, the piles of gold were about 4 feet across at the base and 3 feet high, arranged in triangular stacks. Due to the poor visibility, we couldn't determine if there were additional piles hidden further inside, but we believe there could be more treasure in the area. If we managed to reopen the cave, we could use lights and ventilation equipment to explore further and recover whatever remains inside. I am certain there is much more waiting to be discovered beyond those 4 piles of gold. The affidavit detailing the discovery of gold in the White Sands Missile Range was signed by Captaineer Leonard V. Feege and Tom Bartlett. Upon returning to White Sands, Feege sought legal advice from Lieutenant Colonel Sigmund I Gaslowicz, the judge advocate at Holloman Air Force Base. Gaslowicz advised Feege to file a formal legal claim for the gold bars under the treasure trove doctrine, which Feege promptly did. However, despite submitting the claim, Feege and his companions faced repeated delays in obtaining permission to return to the site. For nearly 3 years, they were denied access with a variety of excuses, the most common being that unexploded 20mm shells were buried throughout the area, making it too hazardous. The treasure site lay near the desolate San Andres Mountains, with U.S. Route 85 and the town of Truth or Consequences to the west, and Alamogordo along U.S. Route 52 to the east. At the heart of this region was Victorio Peak, a 500-foot conical hill scattered with mesquite, cactus, and rocky outcroppings. The mountain takes its name from the Apache chief Victorio, who, in the late 19th century, led raids along the U.S.-Mexico border. According to legend, some of the gold hidden in the area was originally amassed by Padre LaRue, a Spanish priest who came to Mexico in 1759. LaRue, tasked with gathering intelligence on the region's treasures, was led by an Indian convert named Pacifico to a gold-rich shaft in what is now Victorio Peak. Rather than reporting the find, LaRue and his followers secretly mined the gold, smelted it into crude bricks weighing 40 to 70 pounds, and hid it elsewhere. The operation was eventually discovered by Mexican authorities, who arrested LaRue and several of his followers. Despite torture, none of them revealed the location of the treasure. Frustrated, the authorities executed them by burning them at the stake. Many years later, in 1937, Doc Milton E. Noss, a chiropodist from Hot Springs, New Mexico, stumbled upon what he believed to be the same treasure while hunting in the San Andres Mountains. Noss discovered a cave inside Victorio Peak that led to a vast chamber filled with gold bars, stacked like cordwood. He also reported finding skeletons of men chained to an iron ring and bones with red hair still clinging to a skull. Noss returned to the site several times, widening the entrance with tools and dynamite. He managed to move 85 bars of gold to another hiding place before a rock slide sealed the entrance. While Noss's discovery added to the legend of Victorio Peak, it wasn't until Captain Feege's 1958 claim that renewed efforts to recover the treasure were taken seriously. New Mexico, which retained mineral rights to the area even after the federal government leased it for missile testing, acknowledged that the stories surrounding the region's lost gold mines couldn't be dismissed as mere fantasy. Despite this, Feege encountered resistance at every turn. He warned both state and federal authorities that delays could lead to someone else finding the treasure and illegally removing it. Finally, on August 5, 1961, after years of persistence, Feege and his 3 companions were allowed to return to the site, but not without supervision. The expedition included Major General John G. Schinkel, commanding officer of the White Sands Missile Range, a detail of 14 military police, U.S. Secret Service agent Liburn Boggs, and representatives from various New Mexico state agencies. The expedition, however, ended in disappointment. Conflicting accounts emerged regarding what happened. One version suggested that Feege couldn't locate the cave entrance, while another reported that the entrance was found but blocked by rock and dirt slides. A third account claimed that the entrance only led to an abandoned iron mine and that the stories of treasure were nothing more than folklore. Frustrated by skepticism and disbelief, Feege demanded a lie detector test to prove the truth of his claims. On September 13, 1961, the test was conducted, and the results confirmed that Feege was telling the truth. Undeterred by the setbacks, the captain continued to press for recognition of his claim, keeping the mystery of Victorio Peak and its elusive gold alive. After years of delays, the military finally granted Captain Leonard V. Feege limited permission to access Victorio Peak, but with strict conditions. The permit was valid for 2 months. Exploration was confined to the project area. Travel was restricted to the entrance road only. Cameras, firearms, and alcohol were strictly prohibited. Meanwhile, New Mexico officials began receiving troubling reports of unauthorized visits to the area by both military personnel and civilians, acting alone or in small groups. The rumors prompted state authorities to take action, initiating a full investigation into the mysterious activities and the treasure legends tied to the region. The state allocated $50,000 for a mineral survey, conducted under the sponsorship of the Museum of New Mexico. The museum hired the Gaddis Mining Company, a reputable firm from Denver, to handle the technical fieldwork. The Gaddis team conducted seismographic soundings within the limited area. Although they found some 14th century artifacts and fragments of military shells, there was no evidence of gold ore, slag, or tailings, indications of a legitimate mining operation. A company representative concluded, "If Padre LaRue's gold mine had been located here, we would have found evidence of mining activity. It is more likely that if a treasure existed, it was brought to this site from another location and stored here." Copies of the Gaddis report were distributed to both Chester R. Johnson, the Museum of New Mexico's archaeologist, and military officials at Holloman Air Force Base. However, Johnson later discovered that his original report had been censored before the military released their version. Johnson claimed that the censored portions removed references to suspicious military activity at Victorio Peak. A comparison between his report and the Army's edited version revealed several critical omissions, including November 1958, 2 military personnel from Holloman Air Force Base reported to their judge advocate, Colonel Gaslowicz, that they had discovered a treasure and brought back 2 gold bars. Interestingly, Captain Feege's affidavit made no mention of retrieving gold bars. Summer 1961, Captain Feege, Captain Swanner, Maggie Kelly, and Colin Gorman received approval from both the Army and the U.S. Mint to pursue the Noss treasure claims. October 28, 1961, civilians Ray Bradley, Hugh Moreland, and R.B. Gray visited the Noss claims and reported encountering Captain Swanner, who told them that 4 soldiers and 4 airmen were actively working on the mine. When the State Land Office inquired about these activities, White Sands Missile Range Judge Advocate Colonel Jaffe denied that any operations were taking place at Victorio Peak. Upon hearing about the conflicting affidavits, Jaffe became visibly upset. On November 20, 1961, a meeting was held in Las Cruces involving representatives from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, White Sands Missile Range, and the New Mexico Commissioner of Public Lands. During the meeting, Major General John G. Schinkel confirmed that operations at Victorio Peak were part of a joint effort between the Army and the U.S. Treasury Department. He also made it clear that no further civilian access would be permitted. In December 1961, the 4 civilians who had previously visited the site returned to find additional work had been done at the peak, though they couldn't determine when. The discovery fueled suspicions that the military had continued their treasure hunt in secret, despite earlier denials. The censorship of reports, conflicting accounts, and restricted access suggested a deliberate attempt by the military to hide the true nature of their activities at Victorio Peak. But the question remained, why all the secrecy? Was it, as suggested in the censored report, because the treasure hunt was part of a covert joint operation between the Army and the U.S. Treasury Department? If so, what stakes were at play, and what had they uncovered in the depths of Victorio Peak? When recent inquiries were made at the Department of Defense and the Treasury Department, neither the original report nor a censored version could be found, and no one seemed to know anything about it. At the heart of the Victorio Peak mystery was Milton Doc Noss, who claimed to have discovered a hidden cavern filled with treasure in 1937. Over the next 2 years, Noss made frequent dangerous descents into the cavern, sometimes alone, other times with his wife Ova Noss, whom he had married in 1931. Doc squeezed through a small opening under a flat rock and climbed down using a chicken coop ladder, Ova recalled. When a rung broke, he used ropes to lower himself in. At one point, Noss tried to find alternate entrances by lighting a fire in the cavern, hoping the smoke would reveal hidden exits, but the only way in remained the original narrow shaft. During his solo explorations, Noss found the remains of 24 bodies inside the cavern, some chained up, others left to starve. He also discovered 19th century artifacts, including jewelry, coins, swords, Wells Fargo strongboxes, and a silver napkin ring engraved with the words, Talbot Hall, November 17, 1868. Nos and Ova, along with her 2 children from a previous marriage, slowly removed some of the treasure by hauling gold bars and sacks up through the shaft. Ova said none of the artifacts were dated later than 1880. At one point, Nos transported 5 gold bars to the U.S. Mint in Denver. After testing, Treasury officials informed him that the bars were 60% gold and 40% copper, valued at $20.67 per ounce, equal to about $97,000. According to Ova, an official named Mr. Howard confiscated the gold and gave Nos a receipt, saying the mint would hold the bars. Furious, Nos threatened to contact President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Realizing the government might seize the rest of the treasure, Nos rushed back to New Mexico and hid the remaining bars near Victorio Peak, keeping their exact location secret. At the time, the gold was valued at about $2.6 million, worth far more today. Nos believed even more treasure was hidden deeper within blocked passageways in the cavern. "When I get it all, I'll be so rich I'll make Rockefeller look like a pauper," Nos told Ova. Over the next decade, Nos made repeated attempts to clear the blocked passages. He tried using dynamite, but the explosions only made things worse, causing cave-ins that blocked entrances entirely. Occasionally, Nos took on partners to help with the work, promising them a share of the fortune. However, most left after realizing how difficult the task was. In 1946, Nos traveled to Arkansas, where he filed for divorce from Ova, claiming she had abandoned him. Upon returning to New Mexico, he found out that his prospecting permit had expired, and Ova had refiled the claims in her own name. Fortunately for Nos, officials reissued him a new permit, allowing him to search specific areas around the original cavern. During this period, Nos remarried. His new wife, Violet, was a Missouri woman he had met years earlier in Texas. Despite the hidden fortune he claimed to possess, Nos was constantly broke and had to rely on small loans and partners to keep searching. One such partner was Ben Davidson, a farmer from Arkansas, who invested money to help Nos continue his work. "Doc told me there could be $500 million worth of treasure buried down there," Davidson said. "I thought that number was too high, but even a small share would be worth a fortune." The 2 men dug for months, trying to bypass the blocked passages by tunneling in from different angles. But as they dug deeper, the work became more dangerous, requiring constant reinforcement to prevent cave-ins. Eventually, Davidson gave up. "I told Doc I'd love to see some of that gold in my lifetime, but without expensive equipment, it could take a century to get it all out. I wasn't going to live that long." Nos understood Davidson's frustration but remained determined. "Don't worry, Ben," Nos told him. "One day I'll pull up to your house in a fancy Cadillac and hand you a suitcase full of $100 bills." Nos also revealed that he had secretly smuggled some of the recovered gold bars into Mexico to prevent the U.S. government from seizing them. The 2 men parted as friends, with Davidson returning to his farm. "Doc was no con man," Davidson later said. "We worked hard together, and I know he believed in that treasure. I just never heard from him again." Though Nos continued his search for the rest of the treasure, his efforts were hampered by cave-ins, expired permits, and partnerships that fizzled out. To this day, the full contents of the Victorio Peak treasure remain a mystery, along with Nos's final fate. Whether he ever found the rest of the gold and what happened to the bars he smuggled into Mexico remains unknown. Despite years of setbacks and losses, no one, not even his many investors, ever believed that Doc Nos was a con man. He was absolutely convinced that millions of dollars worth of treasure remained hidden beneath Victorio Peak, a belief shared by his former wife, Ova Nos. With her own prospecting permit in hand, Ova camped near the peak in a trailer, searching for the treasure with her son, Marvin Beckwith. Among the treasures Doc had once shown Ova were 2 gold crowns, said to have been crafted by the court jeweler of Russia. One of these crowns, weighing 7 pounds, was encrusted with 243 diamonds and a large ruby. bearing an inscription dated 1856. Nos believed that the crown had belonged to Emperor Maximilian, the ruler of Mexico, from 1864 to 1867. How such a valuable artifact found its way into a remote New Mexico cave is part of the enduring mystery. One theory suggests that in February 1866, as Maximilian's empire was crumbling, he had over $5 million in gold and jewels secretly transported across the U.S. border. However, the treasure was hijacked en route to San Antonio, and the easily recognizable crowns were hidden in the cavern for future retrieval. Adding credibility to the theory that the cavern was a bandit hideout during the 1860s was Nos's discovery of several other valuable relics. One such item, a locket on a chain, was given to an El Paso attorney in exchange for legal services. When appraised, the locket was valued at over $15,000. Another relic, a bowl engraved with the word Brazil, was made of silver and platinum. In early 1949, Nos formed a new partnership with Charles Ryan, an experienced oil and mining engineer from Texas. Ryan agreed to invest $27,000 in cash and labor. Part of their agreement stated that Ryan was entitled to 51 bars of gold, though it was unclear whether these would come from future discoveries or the treasure already recovered. Ryan, noticing the inefficiency of hauling supplies by truck over rough terrain, suggested they first build a landing strip for light planes before resuming excavation. Nos agreed, and in March 1949, he, Ryan, and another associate, Roscoe W. Parr, drove to the site with supplies and digging equipment. They arranged for a pilot, Curtis Noble Jr., to fly out from Albuquerque with additional supplies. Coincidentally, Marvin Beckwith also joined the flight, having asked Noble for a ride back to his mother's camp. Tragically, the plane hit an air pocket over Hembrillo Basin, crashing and killing Noble, while Beckwith was severely injured. When Nos heard about the crash, he rushed to the scene. The Associated Press later reported that something Beckwith told Nos caused him to panic. That same night, Nos hurried out to the peak, removed some of the hidden gold, and reburied it elsewhere. The next day, Nos had a heated argument with Ryan, likely because he had discovered that Ryan had been acting behind his back. On the following morning, Nos was found dead in front of his pickup truck. Ryan turned himself into the police and admitted to shooting Nos. During the trial, Ryan claimed that Nos had attacked him during an argument at Ryan's home, knocking him over a table. Nos then ran outside to his truck to retrieve a gun. In self-defense, Ryan grabbed his own gun and shot Nos twice, killing him. Ryan was acquitted after the court accepted his plea of self-defense. Ova Nos continued searching for the Victorio Peak treasure for several more years. In 1955, however, she was abruptly told by officials at Holloman Air Force Base that she, and anyone else, was no longer permitted to enter the area. Rumors quickly spread that both civilians and military personnel were secretly searching for the treasure. These rumors were confirmed in 1958, when Captain Feige testified under oath that he and 3 associates had been hunting near the peak and had been allowed to explore the area for 2 months. Ova enlisted the help of Philip Curry, a prominent attorney from Kansas City, to investigate the military's activities at the site. At first, General Schinkel denied any such operations, but when Curry presented several sworn affidavits, Schinkel admitted that military personnel had indeed been treasure hunting, though he claimed to have ordered it to stop. "I am now personally convinced without a shred of doubt that Doc Nos did indeed find treasure," Curry later stated. He argued that as a co-discoverer, Ova had the legal right to claim the treasure, a right she was being unjustly denied. In October 1961, Ova learned that a much larger military party, including 8 servicemen, military police, and heavy equipment, was conducting operations at Victorio Peak. Despite this, she was still barred from the site. Ova also claimed that Doc had given her a receipt for $97,000 from the U.S. Mint in Denver for the 5 gold bars he had once assayed. However, Ova said the receipt was either lost or stolen, and when she inquired at the Mint, officials claimed they had no record of the transaction and refused to let her examine their books. Thus, the bizarre mystery of the $500 million Victorio Peak treasure remains unsolved. Apart from the few gold bars Nos turned over to the Mint and the relics Ova still possessed, the vast hoard, estimated to be worth between $250 and $500 million, remains undiscovered. In the arid wastelands of northwestern New Mexico lies a buried treasure trove of $50,000 in gold coins and bullion. This was its value when it was stolen from a stagecoach in 1874. Given today's prices, the treasure is worth much more. Though northwestern New Mexico covers a vast area, a few landmarks narrow down the search area to approximately 10 square miles. The story begins with a stagecoach robbery carried out by Wharton and his partner. The robbery went smoothly, and they escaped with a good head start. However, they soon realized that their loot was too heavy, slowing them down. Desperately needing another pack animal, they came across a Navajo camp. Wharton offered to buy 2 horses, but the Indian refused, as he needed his horses. In a hurry, Wharton threw a few coins at the Indian's feet, cut the 2 best horses from the herd, and rode off. The Indian was lucky to escape with his life and some payment for his animals, as fugitives have little patience for obstacles. Continuing their escape, Wharton and his partner reached Largo Canyon and followed it north to the San Juan River. They forded the river and headed northwest into a range of low hills. From a good vantage point, they saw dust clouds kicked up by pursuing horsemen. They continued northwest, reached Potter Canyon, but did not cross it to avoid exposure. As the posse closed in, they searched for a place to hide their loot, knowing they could travel faster without it and avoid being caught with stolen money. Eventually, they arrived at a sandstone outcropping shaped by wind and water into a natural arch. Recognizing it as the perfect spot to hide their loot, Wharton and his partner quickly buried the gold a few feet beneath the sand. The arch was a distinctive landmark they wouldn't forget, especially since arches were rare in that area. After hiding the treasure, they continued northwest. About 2 miles west of Knickerbocker Peaks, the posse caught up with them. The Navajo, from whom Wharton had forcibly taken the horses, was guiding the posse. This gave him a chance to get revenge and reclaim his horses. If Wharton hadn't made an enemy of the Navajo, they might never have been caught. Despite denying any knowledge of the robbery or the gold, both bandits were eventually tried, convicted, and sentenced to long prison terms. Shortly after the turn of the century, Wharton returned to New Mexico alone to search for the buried gold. His partner had died, so he relied solely on his memory to locate the site. He easily found Largo Canyon, recognizing it unmistakably. He knew where he had forded the river, and the landscape to the northwest had changed little since he last saw it. Even today, it looks much as it did 100 years ago, with few roads and pipelines crisscrossing an otherwise untouched land. Wharton eagerly searched for the rock arch, but the longer he searched, the more discouraged he became. He found Knickerbocker Peaks, near where he had been captured, and the mouth of Largo Canyon. Potter Canyon's open wash was right where he expected it to be. The 3 landmarks formed a neat triangle, within which he expected to find the sandstone arch with the gold buried at its base. However, despite his efforts, Wharton couldn't find the arch. He concluded that the elements must have destroyed it over the years. Certain of his landmarks, he was convinced he was in the right area, but the arch was nowhere to be found. Finally, Wharton decided to confide in a local man and enlist his help in searching the area. Together, they examined every arch and window known to exist between the Moo River and the San Juan River. They found several arches that looked similar but not the right one. Wharton was specifically searching for an arch, not a window, which is different. Even assuming the arch had crumbled, Wharton couldn't possibly dig at the base of every sandstone formation in the area. Admitting defeat, he left and never returned. Since everyone in our family is a treasure hunter at heart, we decided to search the area where Wharton's loot is hidden. From Bloomfield, we drove east on a paved road toward Blanco until we were opposite the mouth of Largo Canyon, where Wharton had forded the river with his stolen gold. Doubling back, we went as far west as Potter Canyon. For most of the way, the road that leads up Potter Canyon follows the west side of the canyon. Wharton didn't cross the canyon, staying on the east side. After reaching the canyon, numerous roads branch off eastward, allowing access to the east side. The road up Potter Canyon leads to Knickerbocker Peaks, where Wharton was captured a few miles north. This was a good place to double back from and start looking between there and the San Juan River. Just before Knickerbocker Peaks, we turned back and studied all the sandstone formations we passed. One spot looked like it might have been an arch in the past. We could visualize an arch with two sandstone columns that might have been joined across the top, with broken segments of sandstone lying at the base. We got out our metal detector and began working in a grid pattern. In one sandy spot, we got a good reading, so we dug down a few inches. The reading got better the deeper we dug. Occasionally, we'd run the detector over the dirt we had dug out, but it didn't register at all. Whatever the detector was picking up was definitely still in the hole. The sand flew for a while until, to our dismay, we hit sandstone at a depth of about 2 feet. Still, the detector kept indicating something valuable in the hole. Discouraged, sweaty, and sunburned, we took a break to mull over the problem. A sudden thunderstorm cooled us off but forced us to halt our plans abruptly. As the rain showed no sign of stopping, we knew we had to leave quickly to avoid getting stuck in Potter Canyon. One of our vehicles was a conventional station wagon, not suited for deep mud. Wet and discouraged, we finally made it home. Something was definitely down in that hole, and there's no telling how close we were when the downpour chased us off. However, we knew we couldn't dig any deeper because of the sandstone. We considered digging around or burrowing under it. We planned to go back right away, but one thing led to another, and we kept postponing our trip. The amount of work necessary to bypass the sandstone was daunting. We occasionally talked about going back to Potter Canyon, but we never did, though we came up with all sorts of theories about our experience. We eventually concluded that Wharton might have placed a slab of sandstone over the gold before filling the hole with sand. Assuming our metal detector had indeed reacted to Wharton's loot, we theorized that when the arch collapsed, a chunk of it ended up resting over the buried gold. Over the years, sand likely washed down from the hill, covering the sandstone. On such a slope, what was on the surface 100 years ago could now be buried under several feet of sand. And so, our search ended there. Whatever lies beneath that sandstone could be treasure or trash, we have no way of knowing. As far as anyone knows, Wharton's buried loot remains undiscovered. If you have a free weekend and a metal detector, it might be worth a try.